Hola, buenas tardes, buenas noches para algunos que se conectan en Europa. I'm going to switch to English and welcome everybody. I am Itzel Orozco. I'm a specialist on sustainability and ESG. I have been for over 15 years, and I'm very excited to bring you the Fireside Chat 21, with a very special guest who's a specialist and expert on regeneration, a word that we've been listening about or listening to in the sustainability world for some time. And just welcome to this series, the fourth series of the interviews, Liderazgo para la Sostenibilidad in Spanish as it was born, or Leadership for Sustainability. And if you're here, it's because you are concerned about the situation of the world. This climate crisis we're going through, but you're also interested in making your project, your organizations much, much better for everybody involved. And the idea of this series is to bring you guests and ideas to inspire you and motivate you with your projects and organizations. So I'm going to invite to the studio our guest today, Bill Reed. Bill, how are you? Welcome.
Very well. Great to be here.
I am so excited to have you. This is, like I mentioned, our conversation number 21. And like always, I have luxe guests, and this is not the exception for sure. So I have known Bill for quite some time. And let me just introduce you properly, Bill. Bill is an internationally recognized planning consultant, design process facilitator, lecturer, teacher, and author in sustainability and regeneration. He's a principal of Regenesis Incorporated, a regenerative design, living systems integrator, and education organization. He's an author of many technical articles and a contributor to multiple books, including the co-authorship of the seminal work, Integrative Design Guide to Green Building. He's a founding board of director of the U.S. Green Building Council and one of the co-founders of the LEED Green Building Rating System. Nonetheless, he's been considered one of the leading thinkers in this field, and Bill has also consulted on over 200 green design commissions between buildings and city master plans. He's also a keynote speaker at major building and design events, as well as a guest lecturer to universities throughout Europe, North America, and Oceania, including Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and UPenn. His work centers on regenerative development, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And this involves managing an integrative, whole, and living system design process with the objective to improve the overall quality of the physical, social, and spiritual life of our living places, and therefore the planet. Bill, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure and it's an honor to have you. Oh, you're on mute.
I have lots of birds in the background who are a little too loud today. So thank you, Itzel. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So what is regeneration? Because there's all this hype I've noticed, like the ESG acronym and the sustainability word even. Regeneration has become this hype word recently. But I know this is something that you've been working for over 20 years, almost 30 years. And this is a concept that I was also introduced to many, many years ago, like more than 15 years ago. So as an expert on this field, what can you share with us on what regeneration is?
Well, it's not what people think it is. And that's the dominant understanding out there, is that we are, and I think that it's fair to say now that most people are using regeneration as a synonym for restoration.
Mm-hmm.
You can regenerate an ecosystem, we regenerate soil, we regenerate a wetland. And that's true. That's an accurate, we are regenerating it. There's a subtlety here, and an incredibly important subtlety is that I would call all of that generation.
Mm-hmm.
The question is how do we as humans regenerate our relationship with life and then rebirth that, which is the meaning of regeneration, is to be born of a new spirit. So this is really ultimately, well, see, it's a whole system. So there's no ultimate. It is everything. And but the unknown, or the lack, the untouched dimension of regeneration generally in our culture is that it requires you to be reborn inside of yourself.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
So this is really important, because that's not enough, right? We have to be working out there. So really what this is about is a whole system of self-actualization. You're familiar with that term from Maslow's hierarchy? Self-development, self-evolution, that we continually grow. Well, that's a good thing. Now, if I'm a jerk, I'm not going to be very effective in groups I'm working with. So the groups then have to learn how to work together. That's organizational development, or group actualization.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that in service of? It has to be in service of something larger, a system. So it's system actualization. There are three dimensions to this work: it's self, group, and system. And basically, this is a process of developing the capability to work in all those dimensions.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. I actually do some work on, I call it personal sustainability, which is also like this core inner work. So you can be okay with yourself. You go back to your center, your sweet spot, I call it. So you can actually go outside, like you were explaining, with your family, with your many other groups, social, professional, etc. So you can also bring everything to the table when it comes to sustainability, and you're in a better place to collaborate, to provide, to contribute.
Right. And we go through regeneration every day, maybe even minute to minute in our lives. If I have an argument with my spouse or partner, I probably screwed up. But anyway, I have to take stock of that and say, well, what was that about? Or, and I then regenerate my relationship, right?
Mhm.
Or if we forget about taking care of the earth, well, how do I regenerate my relationship with that? So it's a continual process of birth, life, death. I basically go through a death if I have an argument with my wife, and I say, all right, I've got to actually up my game. That's a rebirth.
Right.
So regeneration is a living process, and that's what's
Mhm.
important about it.
That's beautiful. So how do you put regeneration in the regenerative development context? How can we do this so we can move our projects forward towards sustainability?
Yeah. Are you using the word development in terms of building development and real estate development in that case?
No, not at
Okay.
all. Not at
Okay.
all. I know that you work in the built environment, but I'm using development in a broader context,
Evolutionary context.
evolutionary context.
Yeah.
Yes,
So yes, it would be better for us to say regenerative evolution, but that would be redundant, because regeneration really is evolution.
evolution.
And what we mean is by developing new potential. So now ask your question again, now that I've
Mhm.
lectured over on top of you there.
That's okay. So, how do you put regeneration, like you were explaining earlier, like from the self to the outside, in the regenerative development context?
Okay. So we typically, we are engaging the planet in three fundamental areas: our business world, right? And we're screwing up the planet a lot because of our business behavior; our sheltering, our building; and our food, our nutrition, our agriculture.
Hmm.
You can do regeneration. Our particular school of thinking and regeneration actually started in the business world. How do we regenerate relationships with each other so we can be more effective with our customers and with the world? All those dimensions. Regenerative agriculture basically looks at how it generally is applied to the soil, but it needs to be so much more than that. It needs to be engaged in the communities we're part of, and regenerating our relationship with the soil and our food systems. Regenerative real estate, which is my particular domain, uses buildings as acupuncture points
Hmm.
to engage community, to then engage their system. So it's amplifying, instead of just fixing a building and making it more efficient and less bad,
Hmm.
what we're using is buildings as an opportunity to begin the healing process in communities and with the natural systems that support us.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So, can you provide an example of how you work developing regeneration or regenerative or creating regenerative development?
Well, this is that's a big question.
We can break it down.
Well, the simple thing, let me just share a couple stories, and very short stories. And that is that the classic one that I always share because it's so simple to understand is a food co-op we worked on in Vermont. And they wanted a green building. And that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But we asked them, do you want LEED or do you want sustainability? And the answer was, it's kind of a trick question because LEED is not sustainability, even though we say that. LEED is reducing the damage. LEED is a green building, but it is not sustainable. So, imagine 100,000 LEED platinum Walmarts, you're still destroying the planet, right? So there's nothing sustainable about LEED.
Right.
That's not nothing. It's just very limited. It's half the story. The other half is how do we engage with life and bring it back to fundamental diversity of relationships, evolutionary relationships. So the question on sustainability is kind of tricky. And they said, well, they gave a great answer. They wanted both. And so a certificate, and they also wanted to engage in sustainability. So when we're talking about sustainability, we're no longer talking about an object. We're talking about life. So how does this grocery store engage with life? Pretty simply through the food system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question was, well, where do we get our food? And the average bite of food in the United States travels 3,600 miles. The carbon footprint for food is so much more than any building. So while we can make the building more efficient, which we would propose to do, of course, then let's look at the food cycle. And where does the food come from? And the food comes from all over the world. It used to come from 10, 15 miles away. So what happens if there's a truckers strike? We're out of business. What happens if a large grocery store chain comes into town? We're out of business. So you're no longer a sustainable grocery store, are you?
No. Right.
So what's the way to fix that? Bring the food cycle back home. So this project then became an exercise in how do we reestablish local farms, revivify the soil, plant gardens in our backyards to begin the food cycle, bringing it immediately back home, planting a cannery to can their food, agricultural and soil extension service to teach people how to do that, a forest service extension service to begin to restore the soil, and by the way, a grocery store. So it had all those dimensions we were able to look at because we said, let's look at the fundamental, the core issue, not the superficial issue, and the fundamental issue about life, not objects. So we're always engaging with life on its own terms. How does life want to work here? How can we assist life to be more diverse and resilient as a result? So that's the first, and that means we start out here. We don't start with the object. So by understanding what the system needs, then it can inform what kind of value gets added to this system, from the system to the building, and how do we add value to the system? Because if we're not adding value, it's not a sustainable condition. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. And it brings a lot of questions for me. I actually just came back from Panama last week. I was invited to give a conference or a presentation, I guess, at a conference at the Americas Sustainability Conference. This is the second edition that they organize. And it was organized by the Soy Export Council of the U.S., the U.S. Soy Export Council. And there were, it was basically agriculture, the agriculture industry was present mainly. And I have this question of like, yes, how I understand, like, you have to bring things closer so that it can be more resilient, or actually more sustainable in regards to reducing the footprint, the carbon footprint. But we do buy, or we are used to buying foods that are not necessarily local, like bananas, for example. In Boston, you would not necessarily get bananas unless there was like this greenhouse that produces them. So how do we um, transform, or how do we transition our lives to these systems that are more sustainable, that reduce the carbon footprint, and that are empowering or favoring, I guess, sustainability moving forward and for the longer term?
Yeah. Well, that's what this work is all about, is how do we transform ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot transform ourselves by me telling you you must change.
Right.
That doesn't work. So the way this work works is by helping people see the potential of what's possible in creating quality of life. Now, that does not mean that we are not going to be exchanging long distance trading. It isn't an either or. There's not absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
We can certainly, I had one client say to me, well, I want blueberries in the winter. So therefore, he's sending down to Chile for blueberries, right?
Right.
Up in New York. And really,
Mm-hmm.
are we that self-centered that we will destroy the planet because I want blueberries for breakfast?
Yeah.
I think at some point we have to realize that I do have a responsibility to this place and what my ecological footprint is. But we don't learn that right away, and that comes from a practice. And the only way that we engage that practice is when we start understanding the system that we're part of. Now, Eleanor Ostrom, do you know that name, the Nobel laureate?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
Common Pool Resource proved that the tragedy of the commons,
Mm-hmm.
Gerhardt's famous article, is, while it is operative, is not operative in place.
Mm-hmm.
That we actually, that people have demonstrated, and she proved this, which is why she won the Nobel Prize, that people will take care of their places, their home.
Right.
The question is that we actually need to actually be engaged in our home. So the first step in all this work is to actually begin working at home.
Mm-hmm.
And understand that carrying capacity. Now, how do we build that understanding? Project by project, conference by conference.
Mm-hmm.
There's no magic bullet here, but this work is fundamentally about building impetus, inertia, and will in each place that we work, so that we can save the world place by place. The world is too big; it's too abstract to work in this kind of we're going to save the biosphere. No, you're not. There's nobody in charge, but you can work on the health of your home.
Mm-hmm.
So that's fundamentally the mission. And by the way, I think that will make sustainability a heck of a lot less abstract and more meaningful to people if we talk about quality of life and about where they live,
Mm-hmm.
rather than some mandate from the UN.
Right, right. I'm so glad that you mentioned this. There's like so much going on with this very fancy, colorful frameworks, which are great because they're having people come together and work and think through some complexities. But there's so much more to that. There's so much breadth and depth to becoming sustainable from the inner side, from oneself, like you were explaining, to the outside. I think that's what will make us actually move toward more sustainable practices. And yeah,
this reminds me. Sorry, I just interrupted you.
That's okay.
In the 90s, I believe the Clinton administration did a big study on sustainability, on the word, and there was a 95% rejection of that term as being not helpful and meaningless or irritating.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, 95% of the people loved the word health.
Uh-huh. Because it's something that's more relatable.
That's right. And it implies wholeness. It implies something that's meaningful to me, not something that's out there. So
right.
I think there's a big lesson in that.
Definitely. And I have experienced that myself, and I have less experience than you in this field, but I have well over 15 years. And when I was talking about sustainability to other people, they were like, what is that? And it's something that it sounds like a big term that they can't break down, they can't understand. And even when you talk about the different three areas of impact, social, environmental, and economic, they're like, well, yeah, but how do I eat this? How do I make this concrete to myself, to my projects, to my organization? So definitely a learning lesson there. So we're starting to get some questions, and people from Mexico connecting, from the US. Appreciative for listening to this conversation. And let me just jump to our questions, and I'll get back to these comments and questions. So through a regenerative development lens, how can we integrate ourselves? And I think you've already started answering this, but how can we integrate ourselves as individuals, families, businesses, communities, governments, even to the Earth's ecosystems in a balanced and harmonious way?
Yeah.
And I know it's a big question.
Well, that is the question. No, that's the question. That's why I'm doing this work. I think that's why you're doing this work.
Yes.
And it doesn't happen but only, and it happens in multiple dimensions. It happens by people talking and podcasts and books and writing, and yet sustainability is ultimately a practice. It's not an episode. It's not an event. We don't have. There's no such thing as a change management weekend. All of a sudden I'm going to have this great experience, and I'm going to go home and I'm sustainable.
Right.
And, you know what? In 2 weeks, we've forgotten every kind of motivation we might have experienced at that conference, right?
Yes.
So what does that mean? It means, and it's no different than exercise or learning a language or learning an instrument. It takes practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the one thing that we have not, it's just remarkable to me. It's the one thing that we have never really not explicitly addressed it, is that how do we build in a practice of sustainability? And that's what I love about our work, is that that is the deliverable, is actually an ongoing. When a developer hires us, for instance, to work in a building, we say, you may think you know what you're getting, but I just want to let you know that you're going to have to be working with us and your community for at least 3 years.
Right.
To practice. That doesn't mean continually, it means once every 6, even just a meeting, just keeping the plates spinning.
Mm-hmm.
Helping people understand their relationship with each other, building capability to run effective meetings, if nothing else. I attended a town meeting in our town last night. Oh, what a waste of time, because people don't know how to run meetings. They don't know how to be effective. And so actually we help. That's pretty much what we do, is we help people respect one another and helping people be effective to reach towards a common purpose. And speaking of that, what our entry point when we work in communities is to help them see the potential of their place, not all the problems. There are thousands of problems, and we will never solve those problems if we fragment them. And then, by the way, just riffing on that a little bit, climate change is a problem, and we will not solve climate change by focusing on climate change.
Definitely.
And let's say that we solve climate change. There's myriad of ways we are still destroying the planet, and we're destroying our relationship with it. So it's a whole system, and that is the hardest thing for people to get their heads around. Well, how do I deal with this whole system? Well, you can deal with your place. You can understand your place. You know where the leverage points are, and that's what we help people engage in, to see that potential. And then it's a practice. Okay, I'm too long an answer, but
oh, thank you so much. And I believe you touched already at least twice. You commented on how it's important to have a systems thinking view, which I think is sometimes lacking of some frameworks or some projects and many strategies in different businesses, which I think is what makes one of the elements that makes a difference in really going deeper into regeneration or moving towards sustainability. Because we're never going to get there, right? For one thing, we don't know what sustainability is.
Where's there?
Exactly. We don't know yet, and we've never seen it, so we don't know exactly what it means, but we do have an idea. I think we know the conditions that we have been altering in the Earth systems that undermine the capacity for us to live wholly in relationship with the Earth. And that's what gives us kind of like the pointers of what not to do in order to have a better better conditions, I
Yeah,
guess.
and that's what we would call the arrest disorder, or slow down the damage paradigm.
Uh-huh.
The next level is do good. We think that we can assume that we're doing good, but doing good is an assumption. And
Right.
unless we understand life on its own terms, this is really an important point, maybe subtle, is that we'll go out and do good. Well, look at what the international development community has done in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
Central America, and South America in terms of introducing European and North American lifestyles. It has
Mm-hmm.
been very good.
Right.
And so that's doing good can be a form of colonialism if we're not careful. So how do we be careful? And that's the really important point, is that regeneration ultimately is about developing the inherent potential of every living entity. Is
Mm-hmm.
that we need to learn how to fall in love with each species and whole system or entity, whether it's your children or a tree. Um, we have to actually appreciate them on their own terms, not our terms.
Mm.
And that is the fun. Basically, we're teaching people to fall in love with life again, and we do that by, which is the best motivator, by the way, better
Mm-hmm.
than guilt, better than fear. And we do that by helping people see how life works in their place. That's the entry point for
Mm-hmm.
our work, is
Mm-hmm.
helping them understand that this place is what, no matter what neighborhood in Mexico City or a borough in Manhattan or a neighborhood in Manhattan, they're different. And if we don't understand how they're different, we're likely to impose a construct on them that will be rejected.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be going too deep here, so I'll stop.
No, 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 that's totally fine. And I understand that every place, even if we're talking in one country, every different place has a different culture and different ways of living. Just geographically, we have different capacities and abilities, and just it changes everything. And that makes me think, how can we in the big cities? I'm in Mexico City, in the middle, in the center of Mexico City. How can we, living in big cities, get reacquainted with these ecosystems that we depend on? Because it seems so far away and so distant, and sometimes we just ignore how the whole system, or the let's just say the food systems work.
Well, Mexico City is a great example because you have what, 48, 47 rivers that feed into the bowl of Mexico
Many,
City, and they
many.
are incredibly damaged, right?
Yes, and
And
we have a problem, a water problem in
yeah,
the.
and you don't need to have a water problem because you actually have enough rain to feed the entire population. We've done studies in Mexico City. And uh,
Hmm.
so the first association is, how do we heal the water? Because water is life, right? Always vida, always vida. And so how do we heal that water system? And that will begin to reassociate us with the life that can be born that way. Plus,
Hmm.
it will increase property values for the people who are cynical about it, right?
Hmm.
It's economically valuable to do. So we teach people, it's the beginning of systems thinking, is to help people link understanding of what's causing what.
Hmm.
Helping them understand, well, what am I missing? I used to swim in that river when I was a kid. Right now, I can't.
Hmm.
We, would we want to bring that back? Well, sure. How do we do that? And what happens? I remember working on a project in Mexico where the mayor said, "We want you to look at these 17 kilometers of the river in our city." So, well, wait a minute. The pollution's coming from way up above, including your city. We have to actually look at the whole watershed. No, no,
Hmm.
no, 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 no. We don't want you to do that. So the lack of systems thinking is endemic, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's the beginning. Any opportunity is to teach is the beginning of understanding, and so we're even happy for that. Just to explain that to somebody begins to open their eyes.
That's great. So, how can or what can organizations learn from integrative design? I know we haven't touched or defined integrative design, but maybe you can help us with that. And then, what can organizations learn from that?
Ooh, okay. Um, well, integrative systems thinking. This is really integration is really systems thinking. It's how integration is how you manage all the stakeholders and all the issues as a developing self, self-referential, um, a collaborative effort to discover what all those entities need.
Mm-hmm.
And in the simplest terms, it means bringing people together and allowing them to speak and to collaboratively learning from one another.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that I ask architects when we're interviewing them for large projects is we say, how would you feel if the mechanical engineer on this project was a collaborative or a co-designer with you on this project?
Mm-hmm.
And I had one architect say to me, over my dead body.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Why is this?
Obviously not interested. The ego is more important than the work.
Right.
And so it really does require collaborative learning and the integrative process is simply giving space for that to happen. And
Yes.
what's really, and when developers hear that space or time for that to happen, they say, oh, no, we can't waste any time. We have to, we can't afford that. And I can tell you that every project we have worked on has been at least 10% faster than the competition. In fact, we started one project after two similar dormitories on a college campus. We started after the one had begun, but using an integrated process and engaging the community as well in that co-creative process, we were completed before they were under construction.
Wow.
So, and we typically, I can tell you that most clients say that we save about 18 months of permitting time. Admittedly, the United States is a very litigious society, but working with NIMBYism and anti-development, I'm not suggesting that we push development down people, but basically, if people need housing or whatever process, we engage the community to collaboratively understand that, and that allows us to achieve projects and better community relationships than if we had not. And as a result, we get approvals. I just recounted somebody reminded me of a project that we worked on years ago where the city, on the third phase, they made a commitment to the owner because he was going for a zoning variance. They said, you never need to come before us again because whatever you have done on your site has so exceeded our requirements and positive benefit to the environment that we don't want to waste your time or our time. You have carte blanche. You have freedom to do anything you want because we know that what you do will be better than anything we ask for. That's the kind of relationship that we need to be developing. So that was an incredible. And so as a result, his time to market was so much faster than anybody who was trying to just obey the law and obey the code. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. And it's I noticed that this is quite a challenge, just like anywhere, really, because it's also we deal with human interaction and relationships, and this from an organizational development perspective is always a challenge, and it's. I mean, I don't know. I guess I have this question like running on my head constantly. Will be able, will we be able to move fast enough? Because we do have, like my mentor Carl Henrik Robert says, we have the technology, we have the resources, we have the talent, the brains, but will we be able to move faster? Like,
No, we will not, and we are already too late, Itzel. So,
yeah, we do
so
know. But I mean, then why
But
don't we keep working on this?
yeah, what are we working on is the capability to survive into the future.
Uh-huh.
And until we solve the relationship problem, whether it's between human to human and
Mm-hmm.
human to nature,
Mm-hmm.
we will keep recounting the same negative and debilitating cycle. So
Yeah.
we actually have to learn how to evolve. That is not a fast process. But the primary benefit of regeneration is not fixing things, but is fixing ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're regenerating. So it's sad that we didn't have to be here. But,
Yeah.
and it's time to be big boys and girls and realize, look in the mirror and say, the problem is me.
Mm-hmm.
And how do, and it's through, but it's not just guilting people. It's saying, now, how do we fall in love with life?
Right.
And and that being said, I believe that massive change is possible, which is why I gave the example of that grocery store at the beginning. We
Mm-hmm.
can have a massive effect if we are working on the relationship that we want to have with the system that we're part of, not what I'm telling you to do, not what lead is telling you to do, or
Yes.
or Carl Henrik or whatever, right? It is what we feel we need to do to be in relationship. And yes, that will be slow. I tell you, it's always slow, but it is massively fast once you unleash
Yes.
that human potential in the places that we live. So
Definitely.
love is powerful.
Definitely. Definitely. And that always, when I hear the word love in the context of, of sustainability, or in a conversation with people in the field, I always think of the book Power and Love by Adam Kahane,
Mhm.
which is it was so inspiring for me when I first read it many years ago. And I do have hope, though. I mean, I know we're late, but I have hope that we can do enough.
All right.
And
I'll share with you what motivates me.
yes,
There's nothing factual about this, but it's an interesting perspective.
yes,
So we believe in working in place
yeah,
by place. We'll heal the word place by place.
mhm,
So I did 5 minutes of research on Wikipedia and looked up how many cities are there in the world. And there's
mhm,
a statistic there larger than 100,000 people. There's
mhm,
4,037 cities larger than 100,000 people. There's 1.5 million smaller. But
mhm.
so what if we transformed some of those places? In marketing, there's a tipping point.
Right.
Which is generally 3.5%. So I
Mhm,
got 3.5% of 4,037. That's 141, I think.
mhm.
So if we can transform 141 cities, we will save the earth.
Right. Wow.
So that's not a big number. And
Mhm.
um, so I look at my work as being our work as being building that capability to engage people to transform their places, their cities.
That's wonderful. And empowering them, right? I think
No, absolutely.
for me, what makes because I've seen, like, in this 16-ish years that I've been working on sustainability, I have seen uh, a transformation of people actually knowing what the word, or understanding, sort of recognizing, let's say, recognizing the word sustainability, which was not the same but 15 years ago. They recognize that climate change, or climate crisis is a threat to humanity, and there's so much still lack of knowledge from businesses, from governments, and from various groups. But it is in their minds, and that, I believe, is one big step. And the other thing is that I think, I mean, there is, once you let them know that they are part of the solution, that
Mhm.
they can become leaders in their own right, in their own um, area of influence, then things start changing. I have seen this in like minor, if you will, circles. And I think that's why I'm so hopeful. I know we're like running out of time, big time, rapidly, but I believe that empowerment will make a difference. And I
Yeah,
think it's already happening somehow.
it will. I'm working on a project right now up in Massachusetts
Hmm.
where the project manager is delightfully passionate about these things and hired us,
Hmm.
despite the CEO, the chairman, and the vice president saying,
Wow.
this is jargony, we don't buy it, this is a bunch of BS, just get
Even
the
now.
even now. Oh yeah. Oh, they're interested in sustainability in their company, which they're not. But
Mm.
so I mean they say they are.
Uh-huh.
So but they don't really understand what that is. Anyway,
Exactly.
she said, I don't care whether I get fired or not. Um, she
That's
said,
bold.
yeah, it is, which motivates us. We want to make sure that we deliver for her so as best we can. And her premise was all we can do is show that this works.
Yeah.
So onward, and that's what we've been doing. And so bit by bit, they've seen, oh wow, that's interesting, that's amazing. You're able to get in relationship with these people who've never wanted to talk to us. How did that happen? So they could see that relationships are developing out of this work, and that's
Mm.
motivating, right?
Very.
There's love involved, if you will.
Very, very much. Well, congratulations and good luck with that project and to all of the rest of the projects
Thank
that
you.
you're doing. So, just to wrap things up, because I want to get to the comments and questions we have gotten from people. How can we lead more decisively toward a more restorative and sustainable world?
um,
I guess we touched on it.
yeah, I would just I don't know. I mean, the simple answer is you've got to live it out yourself.
Yeah.
And the other simple answer is don't hold back.
Mm.
Don't look for permission.
Hmm.
And basically live your life. Yeah, don't look for permission. Nobody's going to give it to you. Just say this is what, and also acknowledge with humility that you're figuring it out too, because we are all figuring it out.
Hmm.
You said.
Hmm.
And where's there? Well, there is maybe love, but there is certainly a diversity of species, because that's how we have dynamic stability on the planet, which is what we're lacking now.
Hmm.
How do we bring back life?
Yeah, and I believe also, I mean, to add to, sorry, did I interrupt?
No,
Want to continue? Okay, just to add up to what you just said, I believe that entrepreneurship or an entrepreneurship mindset will make a difference as well. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur, and I've been considered an entrepreneur, so I now consider myself an entrepreneur, and I believe sustainability has needs entrepreneurs, but more than building companies. It's a mindset. You have to know that you're building something. You don't know exactly what it is, but you have the idea, or at least that's what I hope, anyways. I have the idea of what could sustainability look like. And so you have to, yeah, I guess you have to be okay with uncertainty and be okay with taking some risks, and that's what sustainability requires.
okay.
Uh, Regeneration.
Yeah, let me share with you what's happening now with us. We are getting calls from cities and towns saying, we love what you do. We can't pay you. How might we be able to engage you? And we say, well, we can exchange land. We can develop in your community. We can develop, you need housing, right? We can build housing. And
That's
then we
wonderful.
can use that as an acupuncture point. And then we say to them, what we're doing in one city is saying, and we just don't want to take the money and run. We'll build a community land trust with you so that we can reduce gentrification. So
Mm.
we live out what it means to participate.
Mhm.
And we're not going to get paid for 4 or 5 years, but that's a risk worth taking, right? So now the town has their own investment in this, along with us, and that's actually even more of an incentive. So it's not a consultant telling them what to do. It's now we're in partnership. So people are waking up.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I was just saying. I've noticed like this raising of awareness and consciousness about what we're living, because it's not something that's going to happen or happened or will happen. It's something we're currently living.
Yep, indeed.
Yeah, and I presented something last year. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't know which year I'm living in.
I know, it's true.
Pandemic. Last year, I presented at the International Conference for Sustainable Development organized by the UN, this entrepreneurship, the path for sustainability. Because I do believe, well, like I was just saying, we do need to have this different mindset of creating something, not like people looking for a job that's already under a description, under an organization. You actually have to build something along with other people, collaboratively, and with a systems thinking view.
Yep. Yeah, we're going to cities now and just looking for land and saying we can help you.
Yeah.
And so because you have to speak to their immediate needs as well, but building on that opportunity as a springboard to go much more deeply.
Wonderful. Well, let me just get down to the questions and comments quickly. Let's see. We have a question here from I can't see the name, but it says, what would be some key areas of focus in the journey to help a traditional commercial company transition from a degenerative business model to a regenerative one?
Well, that is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was just on a phone call this morning with some community members and leaders in a city in the U.S., and I didn't feel they had the will. Just didn't. They were saying the right words, but there was no energy behind what they were saying. And for me, I don't want to waste my time.
Right.
So the real question is to look for people who have a question, because we don't learn until we have a question. We actually don't. We really don't learn until I've never thought about that before, and then you start listening. And so the most important thing is to, not that traditional commercial companies don't want to change, but find the leadership in those companies that do want to change. Because without that, it's a waste of time. You don't need to waste your time with those folks. Now, I'm sure this questioner might be thinking about maybe you work for that company and would like to help transform it. Well, that happens by actually sitting them down and saying, here's what I believe, and aligning around belief.
Yeah.
And when your beliefs aren't aligned, you probably ought to leave.
Yeah. That's what happened to me actually many years ago.
Yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, I used to work for GE in the commercial finance business, and I learned a lot. I worked with very talented, brilliant people, but we were in the business of giving credits in the shape of or the products were credit cards for specific retailers like Walmart, Home Depot, and others. And these were addressed to what in economics is called the C&D socioeconomic groups. So basically people that didn't have experience with banks and credits. And these credits were very, very high in interest, very expensive in interest. So I had this moral conflict of, are we really helping them to have a better life, like a better lifestyle? And the argument of the business was, we are helping them because we give them access to buy, a dishwasher or a washing machine, and they can't really afford it up front. So we are helping them. But these credits ended up being used for like buying groceries or buying a huge TV. and not necessarily helping them because it was so expensive. It was like 200% almost what they were paying for the goods.
Yeah.
And so I had this moral issue, and I ended up quitting and going to Sweden to study my postgraduate studies on sustainability. So yeah, I think just for people listening, if you cannot find this leverage or the support that you need from top management or just simply your peers, because maybe you are in a position in an executive role and want to move sustainability projects forward, then maybe it's a question of, should I stay here?
Yeah.
Or should I go somewhere where I can make change?
Yeah, you can't force change. You can invite change.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be you can't be obnoxious about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to ask and to maybe do a little bit of perspective building for people. That's about as far as you go. And at that point, there's enough people out there that want this.
I think so.
Don't spin your wheels. Anyway, that's my perspective.
Yeah, that's happened to me too professionally as a sustainability practitioner. So we have another question. Could you give an example to better understand the arrested development concept?
Sure. Arrest development or arrest disorder.
Uh-huh.
Arrested development, that's pretty funny, is or slow down the damage. It's what we do with LEED. LEED, and most of you know LEED or Green Star or any of the BREEAM or any of these rating systems that are out there. They're basically saying, instead of listening to ASHRAE 90.1, we're going to do 50% or 70% better than ASHRAE 90.1. That's great, but you're still dumping carbon in the atmosphere. So you're still slowing down the damage. You're not healing the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, if everybody stopped dumping carbon in the atmosphere, maybe the planet would have a chance to recover. That's the idea. But we have yet to do that. In all the years we've been working with these arrest disorder paradigm rating systems, it's only gotten worse.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's gotten worse is because we've fragmented the world into problem solving and are not working with life on its own terms. And I know that sounds like a pat and maybe overly simplistic answer, but it comes down to it is that our reductionist thinking is actually destroying us.
Definitely.
So the arrest disorder is, I'm going to fix this, or I'm going to fix this, I'm going to slow down the damage.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, please do that and understand that it's not enough.
Mm-hmm. So an example that comes to mind is the coffee capsules that get recycled because aluminum is recyclable, or is that the word, recyclable? And so I think, because I'm not very immersed in sustainability concepts and how it works, that if I buy these and then I take them back to the store and they will recycle them and turn them into a bicycle made out of aluminum. So these companies should be sustainable, right? So I'm going to keep on buying more coffee capsules. And this is not necessarily helping the planet, like from a systems thinking perspective. But we need to understand better those relationships, I think. And people get tricked into what sustainability is or not. That's where I think there's a lot of space for work in developing, helping people understand.
Right. Yep. So I hope that helped.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for connecting. We have people from various parts. I don't know who else connected from where, but I know there were people from Mexico, from the US, from Canada. If you can send your comments, if you're watching this before, after the fact, after we're streaming live, leave your comments and let us know where you're connecting from. Check out Regenesis group. Bill's work and his team's work is amazing. I have known them for quite some time. I followed their work and I really like it. Also, if you're interested in the personal sustainability course or business sustainability for businesses, for corporate groups, send me a message and I'll let you know when the courses are opening next. Celia Peterson says, thank you, wonderful, great conversation. She enjoyed it. She's from Utah. Oh, she works in city planning. So I think she really appreciated this from her comment. Thank you so much. And Bill, don't leave the studio just to say goodbye properly. And we'll be disconnecting now. Be on the lookout for our next conversation. I'm going to have Gil Friend.
And Gil needs to be partners.
Yes, definitely. He will be part of this. We'll be connecting in a couple of weeks, the beginning of March. So we'll be here as well. So look out for this next conversation. Thank you so much and see you soon.